Hey, welcome to another GROWL Connects episode. My name is Greg Olson. I'm the founder of GROWL Agency, and today I got a good friend on, or becoming a good friend. His name is Wayne Hare of Civil Conversations, and we're excited to be having this conversation today, Wayne, with you. And we're actually going to record it, so some of our friends and family, and I'm going to probably share it with my mom later. So hope that's okay with you.
Well, we'll see what mom thinks, right?
Okay. So Wayne, before we get started into some questions, I thought maybe could you take a couple minutes and tell my mom and the other moms that are listening a little bit about who the heck is Wayne Hare?
I'll give it a shot, sure. And I think we have some of the Civil Conversations Project community on here with us today, so that would be that'd be well, that's great. But yeah, so who am I? I'm kind of just a crazy guy, I think, that I retired from the Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management as a backcountry ranger about 2013, and so I had a great career, really entirely in the backcountry. Before that, um, I worked for Dartmouth College, outdoor programs office, and also some project work, some leadership work with Outward Bound in Boston Harbor. So I've knocked around a bit, had quite a few years just in the business world, and that didn't suit me, no pun intended.
Mhm.
But yeah, so when I retired, and I tried to fish and bike and do the things I liked, and uh, you know politicians have always tried to divide the American people using race, but it kind of got amped up maybe 2015 or so.
It
So
did. Yeah.
I jumped into the Civil Conversations Project thing that we're here to talk about.
Well, I sure appreciate meeting you. At Growl, we've been listening, and our team has been engaged listeners, let's say, and throughout this, and working to have the voice about racism. And I've spent some time reading a lot. You as we'll say, an author, writing op-eds, different publications, and all of that we'll have up afterwards on our Connects page for the listeners to read through content that you have out there with like high country news and things like that. And I appreciate us having time to spend together because, one thing we were talking about is racism in the West or racism across America. And, how do we have these conversations? And the stories that you're going around the country and talking to law enforcement. And I think you were just in Joshua Tree last week and having these kinds of conversations, these very important conversations. I commend you for it and thank you for opening up your time for us today to learn a little bit more.
Well, you're welcome.
Thanks. So what I'd like to do is, why don't we jump into what is a Civil Conversations Project? What is its mission? What do you want to talk about that with people? Again, we'll have some more information up on that, and we'll continue to help promote it. And we'll have you back on the show too. But let's kick it off by talking about the Civil Conversations Project.
So, I guess I'll start with the mission. All right, and the mission is, we're changing the conversation, changing the narrative, the false narrative that America has about race. So that's what. So that's what we're here to do: change that false narrative. So when I talk about a false narrative, um, uh, to enslave people, you have to dehumanize them. You have to. You can't think of them as humans. I kind of liken it to when I was in Vietnam as a Marine helicopter gunner. Um, we never called Vietnamese people or humans. We
Mm.
had derogatory words for them, uh, which I'll be ashamed of for the rest of my life. But made it. We weren't shooting at real people, and so that dehumanization that started really in 1619, and it's really thick. Um, uh, we've never gone through a process of rehumanizing Black Americans.
Mm.
And so we have this kind of myth really about who we are as a country. We sell it to ourselves, and we sell it around the world: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and all people are created equal, and so on and so forth. Um, and that myth, it glorifies, white Americans and their accomplishments, and it maybe at best leaves out the participation of Black Americans. And there's just always this undercurrent of Black Americans aren't, smart enough, strong enough, have a good enough work ethic, and so on. And I get asked the question fairly frequently now that everything is, now that the playing field is all level, how come Black Americans aren't further ahead? But through a series of stories and films, we try to connect, this long history to the present, and kind of show. So an example might be the massacre in Tulsa 99 years ago, right? This large Black American community that was quite prosperous and doing very well, and white Tulsans burned it to the ground completely. And so a difference between white Americans and Black Americans is the inheritance that each group receives. And so if you look at Tulsa, here we are, maybe 3 generations later, and people are receiving much smaller inheritances or no inheritances. And so that makes a difference in their wealth. And so that's one kind of dramatic example to show why Black Americans haven't caught up with white Americans. So that's kind of what we do. We're trying to change that story about America and the myth that we tell ourselves, and by telling these sort of stories through writing and film.
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole dehumanize factor. I think of war, like you're talking about that. And thank you for your service, by the way, Wayne, and all those tough years. But it's how we have to rehumanize things. So I never thought of it that way. So I appreciate that, talking in that nature, because I don't think that, I don't see people in that way. You and I have had this thing, like, I don't see color, and you're like, how can you not see me? I'm sitting in the room. I'm the only Black person here, but it's like, and we joke, it's a joke, but it's true, where I don't know. I don't, it's not, but there's a big struggle. And I think that's why I wanted to have you on the show, so we can kind of open up the narrative. I'm not going to solve anything today, but I want to put it out there to people to explore more through readings and listening and stuff like that. And I think our team has done that too. We have some fantastic growlers here that are really, enlightening me with different stories on history and things like that. So that's been fascinating. Who else is involved in this civil conversations and project across that we're starting to see, that you're starting to connect to you on this? Because you're traveling now, you're getting calls for podcasts and shows and things like that. But who else is involved, or maybe how do you get involved?
Well, first I'd like to say that you're involved, the GROWL Agency. You haven't talked about that at all, but you guys do something called branding, and I thought that was what cowboys did with a hot piece of metal to cows. So I don't still know exactly what branding is, but you're helping me find out. But we're in the process, or almost have completed a process of starting a nonprofit. And you guys are helping us with the branding and getting us out there at a deep discount. So you're involved. I said we do some filming, and Mara Ferris is involved. She's fantastic woman too. So it's great. Right, and renowned videographer, documentarian, so we've done. We did one short video for our first fundraiser, and then we did a 12-minute video on a agricultural community of African Americans that was started right after the Civil War, slaves coming up from Tennessee, and we did a video on that, and that received some pretty good buzz. And our we intend to do probably as many videos as stories. Joe Newhoff jumped into this, 2 years ago, and when we needed some money, he said, "Yeah." He's kind of a badass executive director and fundraiser. He is. Organizations, yes, he is. And he said, "Well, I can raise $25,000 in 30 days," and I just chuckled. And 30 days later, we had $26,000. And so
Yeah.
he's come aboard again as our volunteer executive director and chief fundraiser. And then his sister, Katie Newhoff, does technical work and web design and graphic design out in Hollywood of all places. She actually, she's the top for her field in this, and she came aboard. So we have and we have an attorney. So we have you agency sort of folks, and we have 3 other folks involved in this, getting up and running and getting us some money and making this happen.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with the whole team on that for sure. And I know our team has enjoyed learning, and we were looking for an opportunity to, one, explore everything that's been especially in the last couple months, unfortunately, how everything's popped up and, about race. And so rather than us just really figuring out like, how do we have a voice in this? I thank you and the team for allowing us to learn and have a voice through you, Wayne. So thank you for that. So we went through a little bit of why you got into this, and I think the journey is going to continue for a while. One of the things we were talking about as we step into some questions, but like can you talk a little bit about some of these conversations you're having, or like what like you were out in Joshua Tree and talking to different police things and stuff like that. How is that going, and how do we continue to do those things, and what are you learning from it?
Well, I learn a lot. I learn all the time. I think we envision the team and I, most of these conversations being written or filmed. And I don't really know where the actually guiding a conversation will take us. But yeah, I was because of my Park Service background, the people I worked with way back when have risen to pretty high places. And so I got calls from the chief law enforcement ranger at Joshua Tree and the chief law enforcement ranger at Glen Canyon, aka Lake Powell, maybe to most people.
Yeah.
And asked me if I would facilitate a conversation with their law enforcement officers. And I did, and it was literally a conversation. I tried to, people don't have a clue of the race history of this country, and
That's true.
Yeah, I mean they don't. That strong myth of meritocracy, lives strongly in America. Well, just everything, the playing field's level, and even if it's not, just reach down and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And there's always been all kinds of obstacles to doing that. So I try to have a conversation about those obstacles, whether they're legal or physical or mental or customs, laws. That have always been involved and that kind of exist under the surface. And of course we have politicians just always stirring the pot. And
it's quite the year for that too, unfortunately. So we're going to get.
Well, but it's always been quite the year for that, Greg. When Ronald Reagan announced his bid for the presidency, he did that from the Philadelphia, Mississippi State Fair. And you say, must have good acoustics or a beautiful background.
Yeah.
No, you've heard of the movie Mississippi Burning. That was Philadelphia, Mississippi, where 3 civil rights workers were murdered by the sheriff and buried in a dam. And so Nixon was using a little code language there, a little secret language to talk to the fears of Southern whites. That just goes on and on and on. The whole phrase states' rights, thug, law and order. And so we talked about
certain words. I mean, I've been learning that just aren't. I didn't know they weren't appropriate, right? Because of where they came from in history. You know what I mean? And I think there's and I'm a little embarrassed. I mean, just because it's like, I don't know, you grew up hearing things maybe from your grandparents, or, it wasn't so much, I didn't think derogatory or racist, but again, in a way to just attends the way history embeds things in stories, right? And again, I think that's the wrong story. It's just, why ever we learned the way we did, but you're right. We don't really understand history properly.
Well, politicians do, and they know how to tweak,
Yeah.
how to gin up fear and anger. But it's just been, to me, it's been extraordinary. Fortunately, Spiro Agnew has come and gone and been forgotten. Most people don't know who the hell he was, but he was vice president of the United States in the, I don't know what, the late 70s, and he had to leave the vice presidency because he was going to be convicted of financial fraud and sent to jail. And the compromise was to leave public office. But when he left, he said, "I have often been accused of dividing the American people."
Mm-hmm.
That's a charge to which I not only plead guilty, but of which I am proud.
Wow.
And he did that like politicians do, using race. He was the governor of Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
When Dr. King was murdered, there were many riots, including a big one in Baltimore. He came down to Baltimore and just stirred the flames, just inflamed the tensions and made it much worse, and portrayed the riot, put it on the backs of the black leaders in Baltimore. And then he became a national figure because of that, and was
Mm-hmm.
reached out and tapped to be vice president because he had stirred the people using race. So we try to, like in the personal, in-person conversations, it gives me an opportunity to talk about that. But having said that, what did I learn? The conversations with those police departments went well, and they were very cordial and polite and bipartisan. But the reviews showed me that we still have so far to go. Some of the officers said, "Well, we were just talking about things from the past. I don't know why, because things have improved now. I don't even know why we're talking about race. There are other hard subjects." And
Mm-hmm.
that's it's the thing, Greg. People they don't want to talk about race, including me.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about race. I was a backcountry ranger. I want to talk about mountains and rivers and bears.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming out of the woods to have this conversation with us. So even though I know you duck back in the woods quite frequently, I appreciate you talking about divisions in the country. So I don't want to belabor this, but it is still going on to this day, and it's been going on for over hundreds of years, maybe, how where politicians divide. And I don't know if you have any like recommendations for our listeners and people to say, like, to learn more, or how not to feel that it's being divided. I feel like politicians are perfect at dividing the nation on different subjects, but especially about race, especially what's happening. They're jumping on different bandwagons, and you don't know, just because, if you're a Republican, you feel like you should follow this, or Democrat, you should follow this. But I don't know if you have any advice for people, or, to stop watching the news, or what, what kind of things do you tell people or recommend?
That's a question that comes up often, and I should have a better answer by now. It's so thick and so deep, the misinformation and the myths that are out there. I would say, to white people stop talking and listen. I'd say to black people, start talking and to talk, civilly, so that people can hear you. Which is, as we all know, that's a challenge. But one of my eye-opening experiences was a year and a half ago. I went out to Marin County, California, to write a story, or to kind of check out a situation out there. So Marin County is, in theory, one of the most liberal, bastions of liberality in the country.
It is.
Voted for Obama, hands down, and blah 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 blah. but they had a school district there called the Dixie School District. And some Black Americans have been trying for 30 years to get the school board and the community to consider changing the name of the Dixie School District, just because of the images that brings up, you know.
Sure.
And so there's everybody I talked to in Marin County, and maybe without exception, told me about what a welcoming, diverse, what a welcoming community Marin County is. But, Greg, when I would ask them what they did to, in this county that is 2.5% Black, all right, what this very welcoming community with almost no Black people in it did to portray their welcomeness, nobody could think of one thing that they did. I do know that when you know, when the local government tried to extend, you know, the kind of the, you know, the trolley, whatever you want to call it, out into Marin County, there was a lot of opposition to that, and people in those, you know, very white, wealthy communities don't like that sort of transportation coming in, because then anybody can come in, anybody, you know, any dark-skinned person from the Bay Area can hop on and go out to Marin County. So there's a ton of opposition to that. But what they kept saying was that the white people that were opposed to changing the name, what they kept saying was, you know, Dixie doesn't represent anything offensive. And so here you have all these white people telling Black people how they ought to feel about the name Dixie. And so that's kind of a subtle, but I don't know, a poignant example of white people. They just, not only can they not listen, but they have to tell you that you're wrong. They tell you that you're wrong about the way you feel. How can you be wrong about the way you feel? The name did finally get changed, but not in a really collaborative way. It was kind of got rammed down the throats of the folks there. So the name has changed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure any of the hearts and minds got changed along with it.
And I appreciate that. Is amazing. And you are exactly right. It's no one likes to be told how to think, right? And I think we're seeing that a lot right now. And this has opened up my mind to it, like listen more. We're seeing that name changing for, you know, different football fields and baseball stadiums and stuff like that, right? And names we're going to see changed, right? And rightly so. It's very interesting to me following this, right? About now, whether they're just pressured by money to make change, right? By sponsors and things like that. But now we're seeing that kind of that narrative being told maybe. Hey, I just want to shout out, you have a friend on here, Bill Gwaltney.
So Bill Gwaltney Bill Gwaltney is a past president of the African American Museum Curators Association, a long service in the National Park Service. He was a consultant and an actor on the movie Glory, and he went on a long detail to Washington, D.C. from his home in Colorado to help get the African American Museum of Natural History, or African American Museum on the Mall, whatever it's called, started. So he was kind of a stud.
Well, he's had a lot to say on here, which we'll capture. He said, sadly, more Americans feel the Dred Scott decision more than the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment to the Constitutions. So he has some really interesting comments in here. So I'd love to, if he was even on, if I could get him on the show, we would here, but we can bring him on in a future show. It'd be great to have that discussion more. I really appreciate your comments, Bill. Thank you very much for being on there. You know, so shout out for you taking time to listen in to us and Wayne have a conversation today.
Talk about that Dred Scott decision, you know, which basically the Supreme Court, a slave sued for his freedom because he'd been living in a free territory, and went to the Supreme Court, and they said, the Supreme Court said, you're not even a person, so you have no standing to sue. And that decision was honchoed through by a judge whose last name is Taney, T-A-N-E-Y. And so we're talking about, you know, statues and they represent history. You know, Baltimore has a statue to Judge Taney. And the only thing of note he ever did was drive home that Supreme Court decision that said, you know, Black slaves aren't people, so you can't sue. So, that's their, that's Baltimore's concept of preserving history.
That's interesting. Where'd you grow up, Wayne? I'm curious. I
Well,
don't know if I knew that.
most people would say that I didn't, but I got bigger on a little dairy farm in New Hampshire a long time ago, and I guess that's where my I kind of popped out of the womb, uh, loving nature in the woods and mountains and so
In New
on.
Hampshire.
In New Hampshire, yeah, we have
Yeah.
woods, and back then we had more cows than people, so lots and lots of woods and mountains and places to play.
That's good. That's I grew up in mainly in northern Minnesota. We moved around a lot, but I was a Boy Scout and spent a lot of times out in the woods. And middle of winter, I would be like winter camping before, so I was the same way. I'd rather spend time in the woods than outside in the city. So, so we probably have a very similar kind of upbringing on things like that. Hey, I got a question. We talk a little. You brought up Dr. Martin Luther King. Where were you when he was murdered?
So that's an interesting story, at least in my mind. I was in the Marines. I was just out of boot camp, and I was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, when he was murdered. And my memory of his murder is the celebrations of it seemed like all of my fellow white Marines. They were pretty damn happy to see him murdered. And even I forget that when Martin Luther King was alive, he was despised by much of white Americans. So a lot of there's way more people living today who weren't alive when Martin Luther King was alive than that were, and they probably know nothing about that. It seems like he's just a revered and loved human being, but when he was alive, he was despised, and it took 15 years to push through a holiday in his name. So anyway, that's where I was.
Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing. Well, I was going to have Bill come on, but he's packing for his move to Oahu. So sounds like he's pretty busy doing that. We do have some questions I want to get to. We have someone that came on a chat, so I appreciate it. And I think this is a great question, so we'll see how you answer it. Is it still appropriate to call Black people Black? I assume since we say white, males, females, but I don't ever want to offend. It is rare to call people yellow, pink, or brown, or sometimes still doesn't seem right. So that's a good question. I mean, I just like to call them people. I think it's humanizing, but I don't know, I think it's from a white person. What do we call each other? I don't care you call me white. Look at me. I mean, I'm almost transparent, right now. So I'm okay with that. So,
well,
how do we answer that question, Wayne?
Well, I'm usually called ugly, and I don't take offense. But I
bet you were a beautiful baby, though.
Yeah, I probably was.
All right. Okay. Well, what do you think? How do we answer that question? I mean, there's probably no right answer, but
Black is certainly not offensive. Black American is not offensive. African American is not offensive. I often read, and really recently, that the term Negro is offensive. It's not. It's just a really old-fashioned term. I just assume not hear it. But you do sometimes from people who are 90 years old, and that's that. Black American, African American, they're all fine. I get that it's confusing. I mean, I get that.
I think it's just sensitivity. It's a caring. When I think it comes from, I know who asked that. It comes from a very caring individual. It's just there's sensitivity there, and it's just when you're having conversations like in a workplace or something like that. And we talked. So I'll switch over. We have some questions coming in from Facebook, but I didn't know. We're not going to spend a lot of time on like corporate diversity and things like that, but we get asked a lot, and we kind of lead by example here at GROWL, and you've met a lot of our team. We have women leaders, Latino, we have, we just, we want to have, we want to grow our organization in all kinds of ways, right? So, do you have any advice you have for employers who want to engage in more diversity and inclusion programming in their organization? It's a weird thing to have a discussion about, Wayne, that we're having, but I think you know, how to listen. And I know there's experts out there and stuff, and I struggle with it as a growing business. So um, I don't know if you have any wise words or where you should turn people to, you know, maybe we get Bill on the phone at another one and have a conversation with him too, but anything?
Well, Bill would be a good guy to have on the phone. He spent his last, I don't know, maybe 10 years in the Park Service trying to increase the diversity of the workforce. Um, uh, you know, increasing diversity is a challenge. I think that's why people sort of give up, or then they start including, really, really low-hanging fruit in the diversity
Yeah.
pool. You know, people who wear glasses. You know, okay, we hired one of them, and you know, people who are tall. Hey, we hired one of them, and so we have a very diverse pool. Um, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. One answer would be, make sure you have a diverse pool of applicants, and then from that diverse pool of qualified applicants, pick the best one. But start with a diverse pool. I had a conversation a couple of years ago when I was out mountain biking with a wildland fire manager, and he was bemoaning that he was, there was pressure on him to hire a woman into a management position. And he was, a good guy. He was living in a huff about that, and asked me what I thought. And I guess my main message to him was, his thing was I advertised the job and I hired the best person. My message to him was, if you continue to do that and everybody continues to do that, then how is it going to be change? The person he hires should be the best person, but he should also go through the effort of making sure that women know of the job announcement, maybe advertise that job in non-traditional places where women might be looking and men might not be looking. Just make sure he has it's a darn good pool that includes women, and then pick the best one. And now and again, the best one is going to be a woman. But if you do just a traditional stuff, all your applicants in that fire position like that or the great majority of them are going to be males. So we got to start somewhere.
I think if I have a chance here, let me go to Bill. I want to allow him to talk. He said I think we hit a button here that he wants to talk, so I'm going to allow him to talk. So hang on here.
Hopefully he doesn't tell me I've been saying the wrong stuff.
Hey, Bill, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me all right?
Well, I can, Bill, and I appreciate all the comments on chat. I know you're packing. I'm going to send you an email, and we're going to have you on a future show here to continue this discussion. But for now, I'll let you banter with Wayne over here because, you're kind of like, I like this, what's going on. So what do you want to say, Bill? Thanks again for coming on.
Well, I mean, first I'd say that Wayne is right on target. He's looked at this a long time, as have I. There's so many issues, but specifically to talk to your last point, when you're trying to diversify a business or a government agency, there are often two sets of rules. They're the ones that are published, but then there are the other rules that are not published. And those are the ones where people who are new to a business or new to a community often trip and fall because they're not looking for the hidden rules. So you've got to help people understand all of the rules. Sometimes companies or agencies don't even understand that there are hidden rules. For instance, if your boss shows up at 7 and work starts at 8, that means something. If your boss, wears a tailored uniform shirt, that means something. There's all these other kinds of things. It's not just about showing up. And so you've got to help people understand all of the rules. And again, sometimes the unpublished ones are the ones that are the most important. It's how people end up sort of getting pushed to the curb.
Yeah. What do you think, Wayne?
Well, I think Bill's smarter than I am. But, so that kind of goes to when you talk about institutional racism and people get in a huff because they think that, well, if you're saying that my agency, my police department, my, Federal Housing Administration, my highway department has racist, institutionally racist, then you're saying I'm a racist. And no, that's not what I'm saying or Bill would be saying. in the least, but we're saying that these things like Bill is just talking about, I think that what Bill is implying is that these unwritten rules, the normal traditional workforce understands those rules, and the incoming Black applicant or workforce doesn't understand. And so he's saying that those applicants or those employees probably need some mentorship that they've never had, so they can get aboard and get up to speed, and not be kind of standing out because they don't have a tailored uniform shirt.
Yeah.
Wayne's again just right, and I would also offer that there are at least two big problems in any workforce. One is structural barriers, or the kind that Wayne's talked about, but there's also the issue of either social isolation or a lack of social permission. So structural barriers are things like hidden rules or just awkwardness that is built in because if you've had a 200-year history of racism and don't see it, it's hard to then fix it. But the social stuff is, if somebody comes in and doesn't feel welcome, doesn't feel part of the group, doesn't feel like they're being given to understand what the business is about, there's that. But they also may come from a scenario where their family is worried about them. The family doesn't think they should have gone to that part of the world or into that business because it's not familiar to them. So there are social pressures that can affect people's ability to be fully functional in the workplace.
That's interesting. We are going to have you on a show, Bill, to talk about this deeper, because these are questions we get now through all, especially everything happening is companies, and good companies. I work a lot with startups and across the country, and everybody's trying to do the right thing. And I think you are right about the hiring and things like that we've been having conversations about. So it sounds so easy when we talk about it, but if it was so easy, then we could be able to solve this problem. But we'll continue to have those conversations. I want to keep you both on, and one of the questions, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but I think one of the questions we talked about, Wayne, I think Bill could offer this up too, maybe you guys can banter this back and forth, is how the hell do you think we got here as a country, right? And maybe a little bit, I think, is the history part of it, but I think if you guys had any comments on that, is I'm just trying to educate, unless people are listening online right now. We have a very engaged audience right now. I'd say more so engaged than any of our other shows. So thank you again for both of you being on. But how did we get here?
Well, I wish I had my notes with me. I give you some quotes, and like I said, we've dehumanized Africans and Black Americans ever since 1619, right? 401 years. Back in the when states were considering secession, they were very clear why they were seceding. There's 9,000 pages of original documents from the pre-secession or during secession. I see Dr. Dwight Picaithley is online with us. He was the chief historian for the National Park Service, and now teaches the Civil War era at New Mexico State. And I've read, maybe 1,000 of those pages. He's studied all 9,000. So, all the speeches that were given, the editorials that were written, the state conventions that were held, all of them, without any exceptions, talk about the inferiority of Africans, and it's God's plan to have white Americans take care of these kind of stupid, smelly, ugly people who can't take care of themselves. That's been carried forward from 1619 until 2020. The term thugs, that only applies to Black Americans. It doesn't apply. If I say to you and to your audience, welfare queen, you picture, like you just did, an overweight Black woman because Reagan put that out there. He kind of hammered that welfare queen thing, and that's who she was. and so that it's never stopped. I think it's just it's part of our national DNA. It's been crammed into our brains, and I think I think if I was you can't watch a commercial about doing something fun outdoors without that person almost always being a white person. So that message has been hammered home. So that's a kind of a simplistic, quick description of how I think we got here.
Yeah. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, sure. If Wayne thinks he can be simplistic, I can be more simplistic. I think that when you go back far enough in our history, slavery was justified based on a concept of inferiority and racism. As people who were enslaved helped to build the country, they were growing issues, which came to a head, as we all know, with the Civil War. And I'm delighted to hear that Dwight Pitcatley's on. Dwight is just a brilliant historian and has a wonderful book on the topic of not just the slave codes, but the constitutions and the reasons why states became Confederate and slavery is always at the heart of it. Well, at the end of the Civil War, there was a need for the country to come back together. Slavery died, but racism was given a new life. And so this is why, slavery's gone, the Civil War is over, but racism is very much still with us.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about here. Yeah, some deep subjects and a lot. And I know it's hard to simplify it down. I appreciate you both giving me, our listeners, that insight. And you are right. We do have some great listeners on, and I look forward to having maybe Dwight on too. We could have a nice panel discussion virtually. Usually we try to have live events where we can. Obviously, with everything going on, we're not. So I guess we're getting close here. I'd like to wrap up. And Bill, please stay on if you have a couple minutes more. I guess if either of you had one or two or three books that you might recommend. You had given me, Wayne, a nice list here that we're going to put up on after this on our Connects page. But I didn't know if either of you had something for our listeners that maybe they want to dig into this more that you might recommend off the top of your head.
Well, the easy stuff, there's some easy stuff to go through. First and foremost, to me, would be the documentary called 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and whatever you call it, free labor, except in the case of incarceration. You'll learn a lot by looking at that very enjoyable, relatively short documentary. I think it's a tad less than 2 hours. I'd recommend strongly that you read Tanishi Coates's article. So it's not even a book. Called The Case for Reparations. You will come away with a very different view and understanding of what is meant by the term reparations. I'd read The Color of Law by Rothstein because it goes into the whole housing history and the foundation of the turmoil and the struggle that Black Americans live with today. It is in fact housing and our inability to own homes for really even up to today. And there's a great short docuseries called Flint Town, and it goes into, which is, predominantly a Black town with a predominantly white police force. And it's a great, it doesn't denigrate the police, it shows their warts, but it shows their heroism. I'd look at those four, or read those four things.
I'd offer a couple of other ones. Certainly, John Hope Franklin's From Slavery to Freedom remains a classic. Also, there's a video series by California Newsreel called Race, the Power of an Illusion, which I think very highly of because it looks at race through the lenses of science, history, and public policy, which are still the ghosts in our closet. And the last one, to kind of take a very different approach, sort of like walking around in the woods at night. You never want to look directly where you're going. You want to look a little to the left or right. It's called The Warmth of Other Suns by a woman named Wilkinson. It is about the Great Migration and the motives people had to get out of the South, they thought, to escape institutionalized racism, only to find a different kind when they got to the North in the Midwest.
Yeah. We will include those as a recap also, Bill. So thank you very much for those. Any last closing moments, points, anything you guys each want to say as we close out this? And we look forward to more seeing what Wayne's going to do on civil conversations. It's taken off, Wayne. I think you're going to be the big deal of helping people listen and help get us connected to a different narrative and to humanize, think about making sure we're humanizing people. So I wrote down a lot of notes here. So thank you, Wayne, for that. And then for Bill, I appreciate you taking time from packing and coming on the show to have a conversation. It means a lot to all of our listeners, and we will share this out as a link. It'll be live, a recording on Facebook on the GROWL Agency Facebook page, and then we'll also have it on our Connects page. And we'll make sure we send out a link. I'll give it to Wayne. Wayne will send it out to his followers so people can share it and be able to tell this story. I will look forward to having more conversations like this in the near future, and I'll reach out to Bill and Wayne and some of the other individuals to keep having these conversations every month. That's what I want to do as my company. So any last closing remarks before we go back to work?
This is Bill, just a couple. One is we should listen more and talk less and think about this all the time. The one thing I think all of us need to be concerned about is, I guess, what you could call compassion fatigue. If we get tired of the conversation, we're going to have this conversation again and again and again.
Truer words have never been said. So I agree to those 100%. Wayne, as we close out.
I say truer words than Bill. But Greg, what I would say is a point that I try to drive home is that, and I think that's what's happening. I've lived through a lot, from the civil rights era on to the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter era. I've never seen so many white people so pissed off. And I think that what they're subconsciously understanding finally is that the same institutions and policies and customs that perpetuate the hurt of racism also hurt them, kind of keep their thumb on white people. I think white people are maybe subconsciously, saying to themselves, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all people are created equal. That sounds like a cool place, and I want to live there, and I don't. So studies have said that if we could actually solve racism, it would dump $1.5 trillion into the economy. There aren't any problems that we are looking at that we couldn't solve with $1.5 trillion every year. The equitable communities are better communities in every single way. Teen pregnancy, incarceration, wealth. And so the point that I think that's critically important is that white people get is that solving racism it doesn't have only to do with empathy or sympathy. It has to do with making their families' lives better.
Well, thank you for that. I look forward to learning more. I look forward to having both on a future upcoming show. We had a lot of comments in chat and on Facebook, and people want to have you back on. So when there's a need, and you both rock for taking times. I see that you put that in their chat, Bill, so thank you. There's a lot of commentary here. We're going to sign off. You've been on GROWL Connects. We host bi-weekly shows on different topics, and this is going to be one that we're going to continually have on an ongoing basis here to continue to listen and educate and go from there. So thank you both, Bill and Wayne, for being on the show today. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Definitely.
Thank you much.